Blood all over me, 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 blood all over me.
Sadie Harper was only 10 years old when she died. According to her mother, she had been a lively, happy girl with many interests, friends, and ways to occupy the long hot summers in between school time. Her favorite of these was her swing set. Every day, after school, no matter rain or shine, she would drop her books and rush out to her backyard, where the old, rusty swing set that her mother had owned when she was a child, and would swing for hours on end. It made Mrs. Harper happy to look out of the kitchen window and see Sadie, the wildest smile she could imagine on her face, looking up into the deep blue sky as she swung. Which is why the fateful night of July 31st, 1972 would horrify the residents of my hometown for years to come. Sadie had gone over to a friend's house for a sleepover. While the friend's mother went to the store to pick up food for dinner, the girl snuck into the basement and watched part of a horror movie on cable. At 2 a.m., Sadie, racked by nightmares, had gone into the mother's room and asked to go home. After a short conversation over the phone with Mrs. Harper, both the women agreed and told Sadie that she could walk home, since the families only lived 2 blocks away from each other. With a smile, Sadie packed up her things, said goodbye to her friend and the mother, and headed out of the door into the moonless night. Her body was found the next morning. All that is known about Sadie's death is that she was killed after being struck by a car. When she failed to return home, Sadie's mother called the police, who quickly formed a search party. They found her mangled body at 7 a.m., lying in the ditch by the side of the road only a block away from her house. Since forensic wasn't what it is today, no samples were taken from the scene. The police tried witnesses, but no one came forward. In the end, no one was ever charged with the crime, and the killer is still unknown. Obviously, Mr. and Mrs. Harper and her younger brother were a mess weeks after her death. But still, they needed to give Sadie a proper funeral. Their daughter had been a pride and joy, and they wanted to show that in her death. They hired a sculptor to come in from upstate and form a likeness of Sadie from marble and plaster. Then, crafting a small swing set from iron rods, he was able to make an almost actual-sized replica of Sadie on her swing set, albeit a little smaller, looking up into the sky with a hint of a smile on her face. They put this sculpture in her headstone, on top of a 7-foot pedestal, and buried her in the local graveyard. At first, the glistening, bone-white sculpture with iron rods gleaming brightly in the sun was the nicest and most well-kept gravestone in the graveyard. Sadie's mother visited it almost every day. Over time, however, the family learned to cope with their daughter's death and saved trips to the graveyard exclusively for her birthday. Mrs. Harper died in 1987 from an undisclosed illness. Her husband followed her in 1990 for a work-related accident. The brother moved to the West Coast soon after that, and as far as I know, hasn't been into the town for over 25 years. With no one to visit or take care of the headstone or the sculpture, it had fallen into disarray. The once bright white plaster and marble was dirty, covered in moss and grit. The iron of the swing set had rusted, and it was almost impossible to read the name. It probably didn't help the gravestone was put in a decrepit corner of the graveyard, as the Harper family had spent so much money on the gravestone itself. People said that when they walked by the graveyard at night, they could hear the sound of a child crying. Of course, many people attributed this to the ghost of Sadie Harper. But there has been no photographic or audio evidence of the existence of such a ghost. So obviously the place was a magnet for students to prove their bravery. About 20 years ago, the kids that attended my school began daring each other to sneak to the gravestone at night and stay there until they see the morning sun peeking over the trees. If you succeeded, you would write your name on the gravestone on top of the already numerous graffiti that litters over the poor girl's grave to show that you had done it. Cheating was common. Kids would wait till their friends who led them there were out of sight, wait about 15 minutes, then run home. They would then run back at 4 a.m. the next morning just in time for their friends to come back at 5 a.m. and act like they had spent the night there. Soon, photographic evidence, or better yet, video evidence, was needed to have the real honor of writing your name on it. In a hallway near the gym that hardly any teacher used anymore was a bulletin board that had 15 years worth of photos of kids staying at the gravesite. It's become a sort of rite of passage before you graduate. As far as I know, no one had seen any ghosts or anything while there, but now I know that not to be true. You see, no one had actually stayed at the gravesite on July 31st, the day of Sadie's death, until me and my friend did on a stormy summer night in 2007. Sarah and I had planned it all day. Almost all our other friends had done it, and after month of jeering and name-calling, we finally decided to put an end to it all by staying the night. I wasn't one to be superstitious, but I was nevertheless uneasy about going through with it. It took Sarah at least 2 hours to get me to promise I would go. And even then, I did so reluctantly. Sarah showed up at my house at 8 p.m. I opened the front door to find her standing on the doorstep, carrying a sleeping bag and a backpack whose contents I couldn't guess.
Hey, sorry I'm early. I just thought we'd better go over what we'll need to spend the night out there.
Sarah said apologetically.
No, it's fine. Come in,
I said, stepping aside as she brushed past me.
Have you started packing yet?
She asked me, setting her stuff down by the front door.
No, not yet.
I said.
Let's go to my room.
Sarah dumped the contents of her bag on my bed. There was the usual, a flashlight, a portable radio, her toothbrush, and a book.
Did you bring an umbrella?
I asked.
The weatherman said that there was a chance of rain tonight. No, the weatherman's always wrong. Besides, look outside.
I looked out my window at the fading sunlight as it fell over the other houses in the neighborhood. The sky was a lovely shade of yellowish pink, with just a hint of dark blue on the horizon. There wasn't a cloud in the sky.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Got your camera?
Sarah smiled and pulled it out of her front jean pocket. She shoved it back in and looked at the clock.
Hey, it's 8:30. We better get going.
I threw all my stuff into a backpack and followed Sarah out, shutting the door behind me. We didn't have to worry about my parents objecting, because my parents had gone out of town that weekend. Sarah's parents really didn't care what she did as long as she didn't kill herself. On my way out the door, I grabbed my video camera. All the more convincing if we had video footage. The graveyard was about a half-hour walk from my house. Along the way, we stopped at the grocery store and bought some candy bars and water. By the time we were over halfway there was more darkness than light in the sky. It was now almost completely navy blue, and the first few stars had winked in. When we finally got in sight of the graveyard, it was 9:15 p.m. There was very little light, and Sarah had to turn on her flashlight. I looked off to the east and frowned. There were dark clouds covering the horizon. They'd be over top of us in about an hour.
I thought it wasn't going to rain tonight.
I said, turning to Sarah. She looked off to the east and shrugged.
Oh well, the more the merrier.
The graveyard was surrounded by a rusty iron fence. It had been discontinued for burial sometime in the mid-90s, and all the dead were being buried at a new, fresher, cleaner graveyard about 20 miles away. There was supposed to be someone that came and mowed the grass once every month or so, but it didn't look like anyone cleaned up the place in years. The grass was long, yellow, and overgrown. It got up to my thighs in some spots. Some gravestones, gray and slimy with age, had crumbled and fallen over, leaving the names of those buried underneath us lost to history. I could see Sadie Harper's gravestone from the gate. It sat, shadowed and secluded, in the leftmost corner of the lot, beside a large willow tree. The statue had probably been beautiful once, but it was now covered with the same grit and rot that covered the other stones.
Well, what are we waiting for?
Sarah asked. Grabbing the gate, she opened it with a loud, rusty creaking noise that seemed to echo off between the stones. I shivered and pulled my jacket tight around my shoulders. There was a rumble from a train somewhere off in front of us. The graveyard was near a rail yard, and sometimes people would see dark shapes, probably homeless vagrants moving through the place at night. As we passed the gravestones on the way to Sadie's, the grass rustled softly under our feet. It made an eerie whispering sound as we moved through. Stuck in between the gravestones and grass were small burned circles, broken beer bottles, and candy wrappers from some long ago party that had happened there. We reached the gravestone and stared at it. Massive, tall, and oppressive in every way. The sculptor had sculpted Sadie's likeness, so she had a small smile, but it looked hideously fake, like someone had forced her to smile at knife point. We looked at the numerous words and dates written across the stones. AJ&D, 1998. Fuck Sadie Harper. And They Watch from the Trees, just to name a few of them.
Well, here we are,
Sarah said, trying to sound brave, but she sounded genuinely freaked out. She set her backpack on the grass in front of the gravestone, laid down a blanket, and sat down on it. I set myself down and joined her. At first, the time passed quickly. We had fun in the little light that was left, laughing, joking, talking about people from our school. Sarah pulled out her radio and we listened for a while, albeit with a heavy amount of static in between the choruses. The clouds rolled in 2 hours into our stay, and by that time, it was nearly pitch black under the next tree to the gravestone. The grass, moved by a silent breeze, made soft, whispering noises like unseen children slipping through it beyond our field of vision. By this time, the chirping crickets, buzzing mosquitoes, and oppressive heat of the sultry summer night had overtaken us, and we collapsed onto the blankets in a half-awake haze. The radio still blaring out pop song after pop song. As I stared up at the face of Sadie Harper in the dim light, I realized something was wrong. The smile on her face, it seemed more like a frown now. I squinted my eyes and got up on one knee to look at it closer. I was almost sure of it. I reached my hand up to run my hand along the face. The clap of thunder startled me. It sent me falling back in the blanket while I screamed in shock. I landed with my face directly in front of the radio speaker, and I distinctly heard words being spoken in between the loud burst of static. A bright spark suddenly erupted from the back of the radio, and black smoke started pouring out of it. The static got quieter and quieter until there was no sound at all. Sarah bolted awake and looked at the radio.
Aw, man, I just got this last month,
she cried, grabbing it and fiddling it with the knobs.
The guy at Radio Shack promised me that.
But before she could finish, she was interrupted by a loud crack of lightning that lit up the sky like the mid-morning sun. The rain started pelting down in the sheets a few seconds after that. I turned to Sarah, barely able to see through the long, jagged raindrops that felt like ice as they pelted us.
Did you hear those words on the radio?
Of course I did,
Sarah said.
The radio was in the middle of the Justin Timberlake song right before it died.
No,
I said.
I'm talking about the girl's voice.
Though it was hard to see through the rain, I was able to see Sarah frown.
No, I didn't.
She looked at me with worried eyes.
Come on, don't freak me out like that. It's creepy enough to spend the night in a graveyard as it is.
As if to answer her question, a breeze suddenly began, causing the branches of the willow tree to move against each other, creating a sound not unlike the one the grass made earlier. If you listen close enough, you might even be able to hear words in those whispers. Sarah was shivering now.
Maybe we should just call this whole thing off. Fuck all the kids at school. We can graduate and live the rest of our lives without writing our names on some stupid dead girl's gravestone.
A loud thumping noise, echoing from the other end of the graveyard, immediately followed Sarah's remark.
What was that?
I asked, fear tingling from my voice.
Nothing. It was probably just a stray cat or something.
Sarah mumbled, but she didn't sound all that convinced of herself. I peered out in the rainy darkness as far as I could see. Grabbing my flashlight, I turned it on and pointed the beam towards the other end of the graveyard. I squinted, leaned forward, and saw a dark shape at an undiscernible distance away from where we were, standing, peeking out from between two gravestones.
Who's there?
I stammered out, sounding like a scared little kid. Only the pouring rain and occasional claps of thunder answered me. I got up.
I'm going to check it out,
I said, stepping off the blanket and into the muddy grass that was now saturated with water.
Wait, don't leave.
Sarah cried out, reaching towards me with an outstretched hand. I shushed her.
You're going to scare them away. Shh, just be quiet. Sit there. I'll be right back in a minute,
I whispered. Sarah nodded meekly and sat back. I looked at Sadie's Harper's face, which now had a mask of terror painted on it. I shivered and turned away, heading into the long grass.
I know you're there, so don't bother hiding,
I cried, but I got no response. The grass made the same creepy whisper noises as it was making earlier as I walked through it. I jerked the flashlight beam erratically across the gravestones, looking for a rational explanation for the shadow I had seen minutes before. My foot suddenly sucked down in a particularly deep mud puddle, and I lost my shoe. Cursing, I pulled my foot out, pointed the flashlight beam ahead of me, and caught a single flash of light right before it disappeared. It lasted only a second, but terror washed over me when I realized what it was. A single red eye.
Wait!
I cried out, surging forward through the dying yellow grass that was as high as my waist. I saw the shadow moving ahead of me in the rainy darkness, but it quickly gained the upper hand and disappeared into the grass. The thunder boomed overhead, the lightning cracked. The rain continued to pour down in sheets. As my foot got caught on the stone and I fell screaming into the grass, the flashlight flying out of my hand, there was a loud thump, and I was plunged into near pitch blackness. I struggled to get up, my arms and legs slipping into warm, watery mud. My hands suddenly closed around something cold and metallic. I found my footing. Finally able to stand up, I held my prize high in the air to see what it was. Though the light was very dim, I managed to identify it. It was a key ring which I had left back on the blanket with Sarah. As I turned it over, puzzled as to why I found it over here, my eyes fell on the house key, which was mine, which, to my surprise, was hideously bent out of shape and mangled. Before I could process what happened, a loud, piercing scream echoed over the forgotten gravestones. A high and full terror, accompanying this, though barely audible, was the high, thin laughter of a child.
Sarah!
I screamed, turning back and running towards Sadie Harper's gravestone. I sprinted through the mud, slipping all the way. I almost tripped a few times, but managed to regain my balance. My key flew out of my hand somewhere as I ran, but I didn't care. I finally broke through and found myself in the hollow with a willow tree. Looking down at the ground, with the pouring rain, I gasped. Sarah lay on the muddy grass, bloody and motionless. Before I could run to her aid, a high scraping sound, like metal on metal, drowned out the rain, thunder, and lightning. I stopped in my tracks and turned my unwilling eyes towards the grave of Sadie Harper. There, in the rainy darkness, I saw the little statue swinging back and forth on the iron swing. The wildest smile ever seen was plastered on the statue's face. It exceeded the cheeks of the statue by at least 3 inches. It couldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. The iron was supposed to be unmovable. The statue swung faster and faster as the high, delirious, childlike laughter got louder and louder over the sounds of the storm. Soon, it was just a blur of iron, stone, and plaster, moving so fast that I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, a loud snapping noise echoed over the night. A loud, high-pitched scream was heard as another snap ripped across the graveyard. I watched in horror as the statue, swung and all, toppled off of the top of the gravestone, a splash of blood and brains shooting off of the pedestal as the bolts holding it broke. The sound can only be described as a watermelon being smashed on the sidewalk. My head swam as I swayed on my feet. My vision going blurry, I felt hands cold hands grabbing my arms and legs, putting all their weight on them, pulling them down. I sunk to the muddy grass. Right before I passed out, I saw the statue's cracked head visibly turn towards me and smile. The police ruled Sarah's death as a horrible accident. I dared not tell anyone the truth, as I feared that I would be called insane and that nobody would believe me. I was not charged with any sort of crime and was released from the police after hours of questioning. Sarah was buried at the new graveyard many miles away from Sadie Harper's grave. Kids stopped going to the gravestone after that. It's been 10 years. I've done everything in my power to forget about that night. Until last night. It was my 10-year high school reunion. After catching up with some of my classmates, everyone thought it would be fun to venture into the little used hallway again and look at all the pictures of the people in front of Sadie Harper's grave. Though I protested, I was eventually peer pressured into it. When we reached the hall, everyone was pointing at the pictures and laughing at how foolish we all were. However, the laughter soon died away after someone noticed one particular photo.
Hey, is that Sarah?
Someone said with shock. I felt horror wash over me in a wave. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Taking drunk, slow-moving steps, I walked over to the bulletin board and peered at one of the photos near the bottom. While all the others were covered in dust, this one looked bright and clear, like it had been put there just hours before. The date on the bottom read July 31st, 2007. In it, I saw Sarah, with a look of complete terror plastered on her face. Blood was leaking out of her nose and her eyes were wide and bright, like those of a startled horse. Written on the bottom of the paper, in the shaky, childlike scrawl, was one word.
Trespasser.